It started with a single 911 call. A whisper of horror hiding behind an ordinary address. A woman had just met a stranger outside a convenience store. Trembling, eyes darting to every corner. The stranger told her something that chilled her to the bone when he crossed her. "There's someone in my basement. She's hurt. She's been there for days that I did that to her, and I can do the same to you if you overstep." When police arrived, they expected a misunderstanding. But what they uncovered inside that small Cleveland home would haunt them forever. The officer's voice trembles slightly as he radios in. "Dispatch, we've got possible confinement, requesting backup." Music blasts from inside, drowning out everything, the kind of music meant to hide screams. The man who opens the door looks irritated, not afraid. "You got to go," he says. "Ain't nobody down there. You're making my spot hot." The officers glance at each other. Something doesn't sit right. The smell, the sound, the tension. One of them takes a slow step forward, not yet knowing that just a few feet beneath his boots, a woman is fighting to stay alive. To understand how this horror began, we have to step back. The suspect, Derek, lived alone in a weathered rental on the east side. To neighbors, he was a ghost. Rarely seen, always guarded. He claimed to be a confidential informant, working with local detectives, but no one could ever confirm it. The woman he would later hold captive, Cheryl, had once known Derek through the streets. She wasn't perfect. She had her struggles, her demons. But no one deserves what was coming. Days before the kidnapping, Cheryl had been stopped by police for a minor offense. Derek believed she'd snitched, that she was cooperating with law enforcement. In his mind, that made her an enemy. That paranoia grew until it twisted into something monstrous. According to Cheryl's later statement, Derek lured her to his home under the pretense of talking things out. Once she stepped inside, the door locked behind her. The next moments were a blur of violence. His fists, his boots, his rage. He zip-tied her wrists, beat her, and dragged her into the basement. Over the following days, he kept her captive, forcing her to repeat humiliating words. "Say it," he'd yell. "I'm a rat," she'd sob. At times, he'd blast music through speakers so loud the walls shook to cover her screams. Other times, he'd sit beside her, calm, talking about how rats get buried. When she tried to crawl, he'd kick her back down. When she begged for help, he'd laugh. By the 5th day, Cheryl could no longer move. Her spine was fractured, her ribs broken, but she still had something he didn't expect, the will to survive. It all began with that one chance encounter. A woman at a store who noticed Cheryl's desperate eyes. That 911 call brought officers to Derek's door. But Derek was cunning. He used his supposed connections with police to manipulate the situation. "You know who I am," he told them. "I work for y'all. You don't need to be here." Reluctantly, the officers left, though one couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was being covered up. Hours later, another woman came forward, showing detectives disturbing photos Derek had sent her. Images of Cheryl bound and beaten. That was all they needed. At midnight, they returned to the same house, this time ready to search every inch. Inside, the smell of rot and cat urine clung to the air. Derek tried to distract them again with loud music, saying, "Ain't nothing to find." But as officers moved through the rooms, one heard a faint thump, like someone kicking from far away. They followed the sound to the front porch. A plastic storage bin sat wedged under a table. When they pried it open, silence hung in the air. Then came a weak, rasping whisper. "Help me." Inside was Cheryl. Her body was folded awkwardly, her skin pale, her voice barely audible. "I'm paralyzed," she murmured. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. She had multiple broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and severe spinal trauma. Doctors said it was a miracle she was alive. Derek was arrested that night without incident. During interrogation, he showed no remorse. At first, he told detectives it was consensual. Then he claimed she was a thief. Then finally, he admitted it all, every detail. "She set me up," he said flatly. "I had to make an example out of her." Detectives sat in stunned silence as he described how he zip-tied Cheryl, beat her, and sealed her inside a container to keep her quiet. In court, the evidence was overwhelming: blood samples, fingerprints, and Cheryl's haunting testimony. The jury needed only 3 hours to find Derek guilty on all counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, assault, and unlawful imprisonment. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cheryl, though paralyzed, lived to tell her story. She became a symbol of survival, proof that even in the darkest corners, the human spirit can endure. The community was shaken. Many residents confessed they had heard strange noises from that house, but assumed it was just the music. The thought that a woman was trapped inside for days, right under their noses, left everyone haunted. In the end, this story isn't just about violence. It's about what happens when fear, paranoia, and cruelty collide behind closed doors. It's about a woman who refused to be forgotten, who survived what was meant to silence her forever. And it's a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes, it plays music loud enough to keep the world from hearing the screams. If the story gripped you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the darkest corners of true crime. And if you're ready for another case that will leave you absolutely speechless, check out the next video on screen. A story even more unbelievable than this one. Because sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction.